The late Cretaceous period, approximately 66 million years ago, marked the pinnacle of the dinosaur era, an age when the Earth was alive with an astonishing variety of life. The planet was a vibrant place, dominated by large, powerful creatures. Dinosaurs ruled the land, and the skies were filled with flying reptiles. The oceans teemed with marine reptiles, and the ecosystems were complex, interconnected, and delicate. The Earth during the late Cretaceous was much warmer than today, with no polar ice caps. The climate was relatively stable, which allowed for lush forests and abundant vegetation. The planet was divided into two main landmasses, Laurasia in the northern hemisphere and Gondwana in the southern hemisphere. This geographical separation created distinct ecosystems that fostered unique species of dinosaurs. These dinosaurs, from the towering herbivores to the fierce predators, adapted to their environments in remarkable ways. In North America, for example, the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the largest carnivores ever to walk the earth, reigned supreme. Its long, muscular tail and powerful jaws made it the apex predator. It hunted large herbivores like the Triceratops. Triceratops lived in herds and had a complex social structure. These herbivores fed on the plentiful ferns and cycads, plants that thrived in the warm, humid climate. Further south, in what is now modern-day Argentina, the massive Argentinosaurus lumbered through the dense forests. This colossal sauropod, one of the largest land animals to ever live, fed on the abundant vegetation that grew in the warm, fertile land. Its long neck allowed it to reach the tops of trees, and it likely traveled in herds for protection from predators. Spinosaurus, a larger-than-life predator, also roamed these landscapes, its long sail-like structure along its back an iconic feature. In the skies, the flying reptiles known as pterosaurs ruled. Species like Pteranodon had wingspans up to 33 feet, making them among the largest flying creatures to ever exist. These creatures, however, weren't true dinosaurs, though they shared the same era. They were skilled at catching fish and hunting small terrestrial prey. The skies were constantly in motion as these creatures glided effortlessly above the forests and coastlines. The oceans, too, held massive creatures. Marine reptiles like the Mosasaurus, an aquatic cousin of the land-dwelling dinosaurs, patrolled the seas, hunting fish, squid, and other marine life. Plesiosaurs, with their long necks and paddle-like limbs, were another dominant group, often seen hunting smaller fish and squid in the coastal waters. The plant life during the late Cretaceous was no less remarkable. Flowering plants had evolved, slowly replacing ferns and conifers as the dominant plant life. These new plants attracted a variety of insects, which in turn fed other animals. The forests were lush, with towering trees and vast stretches of coniferous woodlands and open plains. As the world was bathed in sunlight, life thrived, and the ecosystems were finely tuned, with each species playing a role in maintaining the balance. In the plant-eating dinosaurs world, everything revolved around food. The herbivores browsed on vast swathes of vegetation, adapting to the changing plant life as it evolved. Their behavior was structured around finding food, socializing in groups for protection, and avoiding predators. Hadrosaurids, or duck-billed dinosaurs, with their diverse and specialized teeth, adapted to process a wide range of plants. These herbivores were fast and agile, often running in herds to escape predators. In contrast, the carnivores, like the T-Rex or velociraptors, had sharp teeth and claws honed for hunting. They often relied on pack strategies to bring down larger prey. Some predators, like the dromaeosaurs or the velociraptors, were highly intelligent, using teamwork and advanced hunting strategies to trap their prey. What makes the late Cretaceous so remarkable is the extraordinary balance of nature that existed right before the catastrophic asteroid event. Dinosaurs, although large and powerful, were part of a dynamic and complex web of life. Each species had evolved unique adaptations to help it survive, from the swift, agile predators to the enormous, slow-moving herbivores. Plants, insects, and small animals formed the foundation of this ecosystem, supporting the towering giants that roamed the earth. But this finely tuned balance would soon be shattered. Life, which had flourished for millions of years, was about to be thrown into turmoil. Little did the dinosaurs know the fate of their species was sealed by an unseen force. An asteroid, traveling through space for millions of years, was on a collision course with Earth, ready to deliver a blow that would disrupt this world of giants. As the dinosaurs lived out their final days, the skies above the Earth remained clear, offering no indication of the impending doom. The planet, vibrant and alive with the hum of activity, appeared serene. But just as a storm clouds the sky without warning, something extraordinary was about to unfold in the heavens. In the final hours before the asteroid impact, the Earth's atmosphere held an air of unsettling calm, one that belied the chaotic event that would soon follow. The dinosaurs, just like any other creatures, could sense when something was wrong. Though they lacked the complex reasoning abilities of humans, their instincts were sharp. As the asteroid approached, the Earth's atmosphere began to shift. Some animals, particularly the larger predators, may have sensed an odd quiet, a disturbance in the environment that made them uneasy. Prey animals, in their own way, could feel the tension and instinctively sought shelter. The Earth's magnetic field and the ionosphere, which usually protect the planet from harmful solar radiation, were about to be overwhelmed by the asteroid's impact. In the final hours before the collision, the skies remained clear, and the temperature on Earth remained relatively stable, but an eerie tension hung in the air. The dinosaurs, completely unaware of the approaching cataclysm, continued their routines, grazing, hunting, flying, and swimming, going about their daily lives. But as the asteroid neared, the atmosphere was filled with an increasing pressure. The very air the dinosaurs breathed was about to change forever. The stage was set, and all life on Earth was about to be irrevocably altered. As the Earth spun on its axis, the last hours before the asteroid impact were anything but ordinary. Although there were no outward signs of the catastrophe to come, something had begun to shift. The atmosphere, which had been stable for millions of years, was slowly becoming charged with an unnatural energy. The dinosaurs, who had thrived in a balanced world, were on the cusp of their final moments, unaware that their entire world was about to be transformed. The asteroid, hurtling through space at unimaginable speeds, was drawing closer to Earth. As it neared, the gravitational forces exerted by the massive rock began to stir changes in the planet's atmosphere. These subtle alterations began to have a profound effect on life below. The sky, once a bright blue expanse, began to darken, a precursor to the impending chaos. The air grew heavier, charged with the energy of an event too massive for even the most seasoned creatures to comprehend. As the atmosphere thickened, it began to affect the animals on the ground, sky, and sea. For the dinosaurs, whose survival instincts were honed over millions of years, something was amiss. Herbivores, which had spent their days grazing and foraging, began to exhibit signs of unease. The familiar sounds of the environment, the calls of birds, the rustling of leaves, the cries of smaller creatures began to die down. The air felt oppressive, and an eerie silence descended over the landscape. It was as if the Earth itself was holding its breath in anticipation of something unimaginable. Predators, typically confident in their domain, also showed signs of confusion. The Tyrannosaurus Rex, with its keen senses, might have sensed the changes in the air and the stillness around it. Its prey animals, usually oblivious to the approach of danger, were also acting strangely. Something was out of the ordinary. The herbivores, normally placid, had begun to gather in tighter groups, moving nervously as if searching for answers to an invisible threat. In the skies, the pterosaurs, usually soaring without fear, might have felt the sudden shift, perhaps seeing odd weather patterns in the distance. They flapped anxiously, landing more frequently, unsure of what was unfolding. In the oceans, marine reptiles such as the Mosasaurus would have felt the disturbance in the water. The pressure and temperature fluctuations began to affect the currents, altering the behavior of their prey and making the seas feel unfamiliar and threatening. The vastness of the oceans, once a haven of life, now seemed uncertain. The changes in the atmosphere, though subtle at first, led to an escalating panic among many animals. Creatures that had once moved with ease and confidence through their respective habitats were now acting erratically. This was not the typical instinctive behavior driven by hunger or territorial defense. It was a primal reaction to a deep, instinctual recognition that something monumental was about to occur. The animals were not able to understand the specifics of the disaster after all. They lacked the cognitive ability to grasp the concept of an asteroid, but their survival instincts told them that the world was changing in ways they could not comprehend. The unusual behavior of dinosaurs just before the event. The final moments before the asteroid's arrival were a strange mixture of calm and unease. On the surface, life continued as usual. The Triceratops grazed peacefully, its sharp horns held high as it wandered in herds through the dense forests. The Hadrosaurids, with their broad duck-like bills, fed on ferns and shrubs. Yet, despite the appearance of normalcy, there was an underlying tension. Dinosaurs of all shapes and sizes began to behave unusually, reacting to an invisible force that altered their surroundings. Large herbivores, typically the most placid of creatures, became more restless. The Brachiosaurus, towering over the landscape with its long neck, paused in its slow movements and looked around more frequently, perhaps sensing something in the air that was wrong. Herds of ceratopsians like Triceratops began to move more erratically, perhaps sensing the subtle changes in their environment. Their usually orderly grazing habits broke down, and they moved in disorganized patterns, seemingly unsure of what to do next. Even the mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, usually a formidable predator with an almost unparalleled sense of confidence, seemed to exhibit hesitation. It moved more cautiously, its sharp eyes scanning the environment with a renewed alertness. Velociraptors, known for their intelligence and cunning, perhaps displayed the most dramatic shifts. They were the kind of creatures that worked in packs to bring down prey, communicating with each other through complex body language and vocalizations. But now, instead of their usual coordinated movements, they seemed more disoriented. Their once sharp hunting strategies faltered as they too sensed the rising tension, their usual pattern of darting between cover now replaced by unusual pauses and awkward stillness. The behavior of these intelligent predators mirrored the overall anxiety in the animal kingdom. As for the pterosaurs in the skies, they were seen flapping their wings wildly, landing more frequently on the ground or in trees. These flying reptiles had once soared confidently over the earth, but now they appeared unsure, perhaps recognizing the atmospheric shifts and preparing for an unknown future. Their flapping became erratic, as if the weight of the sky had shifted. How different species sensed the impending disaster. Dinosaurs, while they lacked advanced intelligence, were deeply in tune with their surroundings. Their survival depended on being able to detect even the slightest changes in the environment. This ability to sense impending danger, whether from a predator or environmental shifts, would have been crucial for their survival. As the asteroid neared, species from all corners of the Earth began to sense the catastrophe in their own unique ways. For herbivores, the changes in plant life might have triggered concern. The forests and plains, once teeming with food, began to quiet down as plants reacted to the atmospheric shifts. Leaves and branches may have fallen prematurely, and the usual buzzing of insects that pollinated plants may have faded. Herbivores like the Triceratops and Hadrosaurids would have noticed these disruptions in their food supply and started to exhibit heightened alertness. Their instinct to search for food was now overridden by the need to understand the strange new behavior of their environment. For predators like the Tyrannosaurus rex, the changes were even more noticeable. The usual movement of prey animals began to slow, and the sudden stillness of the land would have made hunting more difficult. Rex might have found itself disoriented, sensing that its usual strategies were no longer effective. Its sharp senses, which normally honed in on vibrations in the ground or the sound of prey moving, may have been overwhelmed by the subtle yet massive changes in the atmosphere. Even the great carnivores could not escape the instinctual fear that gripped the land. The skies, too, were filled with anxious creatures. The petrosaurs, although capable of long, graceful flights, became restless. They could sense the atmospheric changes long before the impact, their keen senses reacting to the strange pressure in the air. The instinct to find safety took over, and the creatures, who had previously enjoyed the freedom of the open skies, became erratic and anxious, unsure of how to respond to the growing tension. At the moment the asteroid finally struck, the Earth experienced a cataclysmic event like no other in its history. The sheer force of the impact released more energy than millions of nuclear bombs combined, and the effects rippled across the planet. The skies were filled with blinding light as the asteroid collided with the Earth's surface, creating a massive explosion. The immediate destruction was absolute. Forests were flattened, mountains were razed, and the Earth itself trembled under the impact. The shockwave from the impact spread out, traveling at incredible speeds and causing earthquakes and tsunamis that ravaged the land. The ground cracked open as the asteroid's energy sent shockwaves through the crust of the Earth. As the waves of destruction raced outward, they swept across the surface, wiping out everything in their path. Forests and vast ecosystems were obliterated in an instant. In the skies, the petrosaurs would have been caught in the destructive force of the explosion. The light from the impact would have been so bright that it may have blinded the creatures, sending them into a panic as they fell from the sky. On the ground, the Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops, along with every other living creature, would have been hit with an overwhelming wave of heat and pressure. The Earth itself seemed to implode in that split second, and life on the surface of the planet was changed forever. The asteroid's impact unleashed destruction that no creature, no matter how mighty, could escape. The world as they knew it was gone, and the dinosaurs' reign was over. The asteroid, roughly 10 kilometers in diameter, entered Earth's atmosphere at an unimaginable speed over 20 kilometers per second. As it hurtled towards the planet, it created a glowing streak of light across the sky, visible to all living creatures. For those who happened to look up, it would have appeared as a fiery streak, a bright point of light growing ever larger and more intense as it approached. The friction generated by its entry into the atmosphere caused the asteroid's surface to heat up, creating a brilliant fiery tail that streaked across the heavens. But this event was not just a visual spectacle, it marked the beginning of the end. The asteroid's entry created intense shockwaves in the atmosphere, like thunderous booms that were felt for miles. The air pressure itself seemed to shift, creating a sense of unease among the creatures that roamed the land. As the asteroid neared the surface, it accelerated further, reaching speeds so high that it would be impossible for anything on Earth to escape its destructive force. When it finally struck the surface of the planet, the impact was catastrophic. The collision occurred in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, but the destruction was felt across the entire planet. Upon impact, the asteroid released an extraordinary amount of energy, about 100 million times the power of the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The Earth's surface was instantly pulverized at the impact site, with a massive crater over 150 kilometers wide formed within moments. The force of the collision sent shockwaves rippling across the planet's crust, triggering massive earthquakes and volcanic activity. The impact released an enormous amount of heat and energy. The intense pressure caused the ground to vaporize, creating a blast of molten rock and debris that shot high into the atmosphere. The impact site itself was transformed into a furnace, with temperatures soaring into the thousands of degrees Celsius. This caused an explosion of unimaginable proportions, sending debris flying into space. As the dust, smoke, and vaporized rock rapidly spread throughout the atmosphere, they blocked out sunlight, turning the sky a dark, fiery red. The collision had begun a chain of events that would plunge Earth into an apocalyptic state. Immediate effects, shockwaves, firestorms, and the first wave of destruction. The initial shockwaves from the asteroid's collision reverberated across the globe, traveling outward at the speed of sound. These shockwaves were powerful enough to flatten forests, rip apart mountains, and send enormous tsunamis crashing into coastlines. On land, the shockwaves sent massive tremors across the surface of the Earth. Entire ecosystems were destroyed in an instant as the ground shook violently, causing trees to topple and entire herds of dinosaurs to be scattered in confusion. The air was set ablaze by the immense heat released during the collision. A series of firestorms swept across the planet, igniting vast swaths of land. Vegetation dried out by centuries of warm temperatures burst into flames as the heat spread. These firestorms were fierce, consuming forests and grasslands in an uncontrolled blaze. The fires were so intense that they would have burned everything in their path, including the dinosaurs. Even the massive Brachiosaurus, whose towering height allowed it to reach the tallest trees, would have been overwhelmed by the inferno. For many of the smaller, more vulnerable dinosaurs, these firestorms would have been their final moments. The intense heat, combined with the shockwaves, would have created an environment where survival was nearly impossible. The herbivores like Triceratops and Hadrosaurids would have found themselves surrounded by fire and smoke, suffocating in the intense heat. The larger carnivores such as Tyrannosaurus rex might have attempted to flee the fires, but their options were limited. The landscape was changing in ways that even these apex predators couldn't comprehend. In the moments following the impact, the landscape was unrecognizable. The sky was filled with dust, ash, and vaporized rock, obscuring any remaining light from the sun. A thick blanket of smoke and soot spread across the globe, plunging the planet into a state of complete darkness. The fires that had ignited in the wake of the collision continued to burn, creating a haze of smoke and ash that blocked out the sun, effectively creating a nuclear winter scenario. Temperatures began to drop rapidly as sunlight was unable to reach the surface. The Earth's ecosystems, which had been finely tuned for millions of years, were now thrown into utter chaos. With no sunlight, photosynthesis stopped, and plant life began to wither. Herbivores that relied on plants for food found themselves without sustenance. For carnivores, the sudden collapse of plant life meant that their prey would become scarce. The global temperature plunged, creating an icy, inhospitable world. Many species would have died within days due to the drastic climate shift and lack of food. In the aftermath of the initial blast, the surviving dinosaurs would have been exposed to extreme conditions. For some, survival meant retreating underground or seeking shelter in caves to avoid the fires and the scorching heat. However, even these shelters would not have been enough to protect them from the extreme changes that followed. The atmosphere had been altered beyond recognition, and the survivors of the impact would have found themselves struggling against an Earth that no longer resembled the one they had known. The impact affected dinosaurs of all sizes, but their responses to the catastrophe vary depending on their size and ecological role. Large dinosaurs like the Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, and Brachiosaurus would have initially reacted with confusion and panic. Their massive size and strength had given them dominance over their respective ecosystems, but the magnitude of the asteroid impact was beyond anything they could have prepared for. For the herbivorous giants such as the Brachiosaurus, which roamed the forests in search of treetop foliage, the fires and the sudden drop in temperature would have overwhelmed them. These colossal creatures, which depended on vast amounts of food, would have struggled to find nourishment in a landscape ravaged by fire and darkness. In an attempt to flee, many would have found themselves in the path of the advancing firestorms, where they were consumed by the flames. For smaller dinosaurs, such as the Velociraptor and Dromaeosaurs, the situation was no less dire. Although they were faster and more agile, they were not immune to the extreme environmental changes. The darkness caused by the ash and soot in the sky would have disoriented these predators, leaving them unable to hunt effectively. The sharp drop in temperature and the loss of food sources would have caused starvation to spread rapidly throughout the smaller species. The frantic behavior exhibited by these dinosaurs in their final moments likely reflected their confusion and desperation in the face of an environment that was no longer predictable. The smaller herbivores, too, would have faced extreme challenges. For hadrosaurids, hypsilophodonts, and other smaller plant-eating dinosaurs, their usual grazing areas were now in ruins. The fires and extreme heat would have pushed them into areas with fewer food resources. Many of them likely tried to flee to cooler, more stable regions, but the sudden drop in temperature and the global darkness left them with little opportunity for survival. The immediate aftermath of the asteroid impact was marked by a series of global effects that plunged Earth into a state of utter chaos. Firestorms ravaged the planet's surface, destroying ecosystems and wiping out much of the life that had thrived. These fires burned unchecked for days, fueled by the debris from the impact and the global rise in temperature. The fires not only consumed the surface of the Earth, but also sent large amounts of soot and ash into the atmosphere, blocking out the sun and plunging the planet into total darkness. This impact winter lasted for months, perhaps even years. The global temperatures plummeted dramatically as sunlight was unable to penetrate the thick layer of atmospheric particles. The world became cold, barren, and inhospitable. The once thriving ecosystems rich with forests, grasslands, and oceans were replaced by a wasteland where survival became a matter of chance. The lack of sunlight had a devastating impact on photosynthesis, which meant that plant life withered. Herbivores, already struggling to find food, began to starve. The carnivores, deprived of their prey, faced the same fate. The Earth's biosphere was now in a downward spiral, with the extinction of many species already underway. The global chaos brought on by the impact event marked the end of the age of dinosaurs, changing the course of life on Earth forever. The asteroid's impact was not just a localized event, it set off a series of global environmental changes that radically transformed Earth. The collision released an enormous amount of energy, generating extreme heat and shockwaves that reverberated around the world. These shockwaves triggered massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis, causing widespread devastation. But the most dramatic effects were felt in the atmosphere and climate. In the aftermath of the impact, the Earth's atmosphere was choked with dust, soot, and ash, much of it injected into the upper layers of the atmosphere, where it would remain for weeks or even months. This debris blocked sunlight, preventing it from reaching the surface and causing global temperatures to plummet. The thick cloud cover created an instant nuclear winter scenario, where the sky became darkened by the particulate matter, casting Earth into a perpetual twilight. As a result, the global climate shifted rapidly from warm and temperate to cold and inhospitable. The dramatic temperature drop disrupted the balance of life on Earth, throwing entire ecosystems into chaos. The atmospheric effects, a world plunged into darkness and firestorm. Immediately following the asteroid impact, the atmosphere was thrown into turmoil. The intense heat and pressure from the collision ignited widespread firestorms across the planet. These fires burned with ferocity, consuming forests, grasslands, and even the peat-rich wetlands, sending massive amounts of smoke and ash into the air. As the fires raged, the smoke billowed up into the atmosphere, mixing with dust and debris thrown up by the impact, creating an opaque, soot-filled layer that blocked the sun's rays. This atmospheric shift caused temperatures to drop rapidly, sending the planet into a prolonged cold snap. In some areas, the surface temperature dropped by as much as 10 C, 18 FA, within a matter of hours, and over the next few weeks, Earth's climate would cool dramatically. The absence of sunlight led to a complete loss of photosynthesis, devastating plant life, and making survival nearly impossible for herbivores that relied on plants for food. Meanwhile, the firestorms that continued to burn in some regions produced intense heat waves, making certain areas uninhabitable. The once clear skies were now perpetually darkened, with the sun hidden by a thick layer of ash and debris, turning day into night. How this environmental shift impacted plant life and herbivores. The collapse of plant life due to the drastic climate change was one of the first signs of the global devastation that was to come. Without sunlight, plants were unable to perform photosynthesis, causing them to die off in vast quantities. The first wave of extinction hit plant life hard, and within a short time the lush forests and plant-covered plains that had once sustained herbivorous dinosaurs were reduced to barren landscapes. For the plant-eating dinosaurs, this environmental collapse was catastrophic. Herbivores like Triceratops, Hadrosaurids, and smaller plant-eating species found themselves without food. As the plants died, so did their food sources. These creatures, which had evolved to graze and browse across vast verdant landscapes, now faced a world where food was nearly non-existent. With no plants to eat, the herbivores began to starve. In the absence of plant life, the herbivores' desperate search for food would have led them into conflict with each other and with the environment itself. The once bustling ecosystems of herbivores, which included vast herds roaming across plains, were rapidly decimated. Species that could not adapt to this sudden lack of food were the first to fall, with many species disappearing within a matter of days or weeks after the impact. The survival struggle in the immediate aftermath. In the immediate aftermath of the impact, survival became a matter of endurance. The first few hours after the collision saw widespread chaos, with shockwaves, firestorms, and tremors destabilizing the Earth. But even after the dust began to settle, the real struggle began. Dinosaurs, regardless of their size, were now forced to contend with a rapidly changing world. For the larger dinosaurs, like Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, and Brachiosaurus, survival was especially difficult. These massive creatures required vast amounts of food to sustain themselves, and with the world's plant life decimated and smaller prey animals dying off, the larger herbivores and carnivores faced starvation. The Tyrannosaurus rex, the apex predator of its time, now found itself with fewer prey animals to hunt. The situation would have been dire for even the most formidable of the carnivores, as their food sources dwindled and their ecosystems collapsed. For smaller dinosaurs, like the velociraptor and dromaeosaurs, the struggle was equally intense. While they were more agile and capable of faster movement, they too were reliant on the creatures around them for food. The dramatic loss of herbivores meant that even these predators were in trouble. In the absence of a steady food supply, they would have turned to whatever they could scavenge, but even their speed and cunning were not enough to overcome the environmental changes that now defined Earth. The sudden darkness, combined with the cooling temperatures, disoriented many species. Without the warmth of the sun, temperatures plummeted and the cold proved to be just as deadly as the heat. Many species, unable to adapt to the sudden drop in temperature and lack of food, would have quickly succumbed to starvation and exposure. Some species sought shelter in caves or underground, hoping to escape the worst of the environmental collapse. However, these temporary refugees were not enough to shield them from the long-term changes that would ravage the planet. The dinosaurs that did manage to survive the immediate aftermath of the asteroid impact were left to contend with a barren world, one where food was scarce, the sky was dark, and the environment was hostile. The immediate aftermath, dinosaurs struggle for survival. As the dust began to settle, the immediate aftermath of the asteroid impact left the planet unrecognizable. The survivors, now few and far between, faced a landscape that was uninhabitable. The skies, once filled with the songs of birds and the calls of distant creatures, were now silent. The sounds of the forest were replaced by the howls of winds and the crackling of distant fires. Life as it had been known was over, and those dinosaurs fortunate enough to survive the initial shock faced a harsh battle for survival. The survivors of the initial impact would have been few. Only those who had adapted to the harsh conditions or who had found shelter in caves or other hidden places managed to make it through the first days. As the planet entered into its long impact winter, many of the surviving species, both herbivores and carnivores, would have entered into a state of dormancy or hibernation. For those that survived, the future was uncertain, and the struggle for survival in the aftermath of the impact would be a battle unlike any other that Earth had ever witnessed. As the Earth underwent a massive, unprecedented transformation following the asteroid impact, dinosaurs were left reeling, unable to comprehend the scale of the destruction unfolding around them. For many, the immediate effects of the disaster, the shockwaves, firestorms, and atmospheric changes were overwhelming. Dinosaurs that had once roamed the planet in flourishing ecosystems now found themselves in a completely altered environment. Herbivores such as the Triceratops and Hadrosaurids, which had thrived in lush, plant-filled environments, were suddenly faced with barren landscapes where food was scarce. These creatures had evolved to consume vast quantities of plant matter, but with the rapid extinction of vegetation, their survival instincts were pushed to the limit. As temperatures plummeted and the skies darkened, many dinosaurs sought refuge in what little shelter remained, but this was not enough to save them. The immediate reaction of many species was confusion and panic. The suddenness of the event left little time for them to adjust, and many fell victim to the fires, tremors, and collapsing ecosystems. Carnivores, like the Tyrannosaurus rex, reacted with a mixture of aggression and desperation. They found themselves unable to hunt as their prey species were either wiped out or left hiding. The once robust predator-prey relationships were shattered, and these apex predators had no choice but to scavenge what they could, often competing with others for the limited resources available. The chaos caused by the environmental catastrophe was unlike anything they had encountered, and their reactions were driven by a deep need to survive in a world that no longer resembled the one they had known. How the survivors tried to adapt, find food, and escape danger. In the aftermath of the asteroid impact, some dinosaurs managed to adapt at least temporarily to the changed world. Their survival strategies were driven by necessity, and their chances of survival depended on a combination of luck, instinct, and adaptability. Many survivors sought shelter in caves or underground burrows where they could escape the worst of the fires and the freezing temperatures. Some smaller species, which had more flexibility in their diet, may have scavenged for whatever food they could find, including the remains of their fallen brethren. However, these strategies could only provide short-term relief. Herbivores like the Hypsilophodon and Iguanodon were faced with the complete collapse of their food sources. Without the abundant plants they depended on, they were left with very little to sustain them. Some may have resorted to browsing on the few remaining hardy plants that could survive the drastic climate changes, but these resources were too limited to support entire populations. The drastic drop in temperature also meant that many herbivores were unable to metabolize food as efficiently, further compounding the problem. For carnivores, the situation was no less dire. The lack of herbivores, their primary food source, forced them to adapt by becoming more opportunistic. Tyrannosaurus rex, Velociraptor, and other predators likely scoured the scorched landscape in search of any prey they could catch. But Without healthy herds of herbivores to hunt, their survival became an increasingly uncertain challenge. Some larger carnivores may have relied on scavenging the carcasses of smaller dinosaurs or even fellow predators. However, in a world where death was rampant, competition for these remains was fierce, and the scavengers faced the same environmental dangers as their prey. Despite their best efforts, the dinosaurs could not escape the catastrophic environmental changes that had reshaped their world. The fires, darkness, and global temperature shifts were not temporary disruptions. They were permanent alterations to the planet's climate and ecosystems. The survivors were forced to face a harsh new reality, one where food was scarce, shelter was hard to find, and the chances of survival were increasingly slim. The asteroid impact didn't just kill individual dinosaurs, it wiped out entire ecosystems. The forests, wetlands, and grasslands that had once provided food and shelter for millions of species were decimated by the immediate effects of the impact. The widespread fires that followed destroyed vast swaths of plant life, leaving nothing behind but ash and charred remnants. The thick clouds of dust and soot that enveloped the planet prevented sunlight from reaching the surface, causing a dramatic drop in temperatures and halting the process of photosynthesis. As plant life died off, so too did the herbivores that relied on it, and in turn, the carnivores that depended on those herbivores. In the span of a few hours, the once thriving ecosystems were effectively eradicated. The lush forests that had housed herds of Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and other herbivores were consumed by flames. The wide open plains that had sustained hadrosaurids and smaller herbivorous dinosaurs were now barren deserts. The oceans and freshwater lakes teeming with life were poisoned by ash and debris from the impact, causing the collapse of aquatic ecosystems as well. Species that had once thrived in specific habitats were suddenly faced with an inhospitable world where nothing could grow or survive. For the carnivores, desperation likely set in. Tyrannosaurus rex, Velociraptor, and other predators would have been forced to fight for survival, scavenging anything they could find. These apex predators, once the rulers of the food chain, were now forced into a corner. Their heightened senses, which had once made them successful hunters, could not compensate for the lack of prey. This mass extinction event brought about the death of countless species, many of which had no time to adapt to the rapidly changing environment. What had once been a vibrant planet teeming with life was now a wasteland where the few surviving dinosaurs were scattered, struggling to survive in the face of an unforgiving, altered world. As the environmental conditions deteriorated, the behavior of dinosaurs shifted dramatically. For many, survival instinct would have been their primary motivation, but in the face of such overwhelming catastrophe, there was little they could do to save themselves. The dinosaurs' behaviors would have been driven by a combination of fear, confusion, and desperation. In the days following the impact, panic likely spread across the surviving species. Herds of herbivores, once able to move in synchrony and organize themselves into effective groups, would have fractured as the survivors desperately searched for food and shelter. The confusion created by the firestorms, darkness, and dropping temperatures would have caused many to become disoriented, making it impossible for them to find safety. For the larger herbivores, the sight of firestorms and the growing chaos in their environment would have triggered frantic flight responses, but where could they flee to? The landscape was burning, and the sky was darkened by the smoke and ash. For the carnivores, desperation likely set in. Tyrannosaurus rex, Velociraptor, and other predators would have been forced to fight for survival, scavenging anything they could find. These apex predators, once the rulers of the food chain, were now forced into a corner. Their heightened senses, which had once made them successful hunters, could not compensate for the lack of prey. Their once efficient hunting strategies became ineffective in an environment where food was scarce and their natural habitats were destroyed. For some species, this period of desperation and confusion would have lasted for weeks or even months. As they struggled to find food and shelter, their populations began to dwindle, and many would have perished in the brutal, inhospitable world left in the wake of the impact. The slow decline of the dinosaurs began immediately after the asteroid impact, and it was a process that would stretch across thousands of years. While the immediate effects of the impact were catastrophic, the long-term consequences would be felt far longer. As the fires eventually died down, the darkness that covered the Earth persisted. Without sunlight, the planet's temperature continued to plummet, and ecosystems remained out of balance. The process of evolution, which had shaped life on Earth for millions of years, was now halted abruptly. Over the next several generations, the dinosaurs that managed to survive the immediate aftermath of the impact began to face the slow death of their species. The lack of food, the extreme cold, and the inhospitable conditions would have gradually eroded their populations. The herbivores, unable to find enough food, would have starved, while the carnivores found themselves unable to hunt efficiently. As the ecosystem continued to collapse, it became increasingly difficult for life to recover. Some species may have adapted to the new world, evolving over time to cope with the harsh conditions, but the majority of dinosaurs could not. The slow extinction of the dinosaurs was not a single event, it was a long, drawn-out process of death and survival. The world that had once supported such diverse and thriving ecosystems had become an unforgiving place, and it was only a matter of time before the last of the great reptiles were gone. As the climate stabilized and the Earth began to recover, mammals started to rise, filling the ecological niches left empty by the dinosaurs' extinction. But for the dinosaurs, their time had come to an end. The slow decline had been set in motion, and it would culminate in the extinction of nearly all dinosaur species, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a new age for life on Earth. The extinction of the dinosaurs was not an instantaneous event, despite the catastrophic nature of the asteroid impact. While the immediate effects were devastating, the gradual perishing of dinosaur populations unfolded over weeks and months as the planet's ecosystem continued to collapse. In the initial days following the impact, the firestorms and atmospheric chaos killed many dinosaurs outright. However, the survivors faced a far slower, more insidious demise. For herbivores, the lack of food became the primary cause of death. As plant life failed due to the lack of sunlight, those dinosaurs that relied heavily on vegetation, like Triceratops and Hadrosaurids, began to starve. For the larger herbivores, which required vast amounts of plant matter to survive, this was particularly fatal. The cold temperatures compounded the issue as the dinosaurs' metabolism slowed and they struggled to extract energy from the remaining sparse food sources. Carnivores, which depended on herbivores for food, found themselves facing an equally grim fate. Without prey to hunt, predators like Tyrannosaurus rex and Velociraptor would have had to scavenge whatever they could find. As time went on, these food sources dwindled, and even scavengers were left hungry. Without enough food, many of the survivors began to die off in a slow, agonizing process, unable to adapt fast enough to the changing world. This prolonged extinction was driven by a combination of environmental stresses, food scarcity, extreme temperatures, and the collapse of ecosystems that stretched out the final demise of the dinosaurs over months, if not longer. With the asteroid's impact triggering such dramatic climate shifts, the delicate balance of Earth's ecosystems was irrevocably altered. Before the impact, ecosystems had been finely tuned, with herbivores, carnivores, and plants forming interdependent relationships. But with the massive die-off of plants and herbivores, the entire food chain began to unravel. The immediate effects on herbivores, who were unable to find enough food, meant that the predators who depended on them for sustenance quickly faced a food shortage. This caused a cascading effect across the ecosystem. Herbivores like Triceratops and Ankylosaurs, who fed on plants, were the first to feel the pinch. As the plants died off, these large dinosaurs found themselves unable to consume enough to sustain their bodies. This was followed by the collapse of carnivores like Tyrannosaurus rex, which had once relied on thriving herbivore populations. As food became increasingly scarce, many predators resorted to scavenging, but this only extended the inevitable for a short time. The food chain itself collapsed in a matter of weeks. With no plants to produce oxygen and food for herbivores, and no prey for carnivores, entire ecosystems began to disintegrate. The impact of this collapse wasn't just felt on land, it was seen in the oceans too. Marine ecosystems full of fish, cephalopods, and other creatures were also decimated. The after effects of the impact, including acid rain and debris falling into the oceans, severely disrupted marine life. While most of the dinosaurs perished, a few species managed to survive the initial aftermath and subsequent months of environmental chaos. The survivors were typically those that could adapt the most quickly to the drastic changes, often because of their small size, mobility, or diet flexibility. Smaller dinosaurs, such as Hypsilophodon or certain raptors, were more able to move quickly and find shelter in caves or burrows. These small, adaptable creatures could survive by being opportunistic feeders, scavenging whatever scraps they could find. Their ability to remain in hiding, coupled with their relatively low food requirements, allowed them to endure longer than the larger, more specialized dinosaurs. Some species, like certain flying reptiles, pterosaurs, may have had a chance to survive by fleeing the areas directly affected by the impact. However, even these creatures faced challenges, as the ash clouds and global temperature drop would have impacted their ability to find food and thrive in the long term. Herbivorous survivors had fewer options. Some may have been able to feed on whatever sparse vegetation remained, but this would have been insufficient for long-term survival. The ability to adapt to new food sources, such as small, hardy plants or even decaying organic matter, would have been essential for survival. However, the changes in the environment were so extreme that even the most adaptable species struggled to survive. The survivors of the dinosaur extinction event played a crucial role in shaping the evolutionary landscape that followed. While the vast majority of dinosaur species perished, those that managed to survive became the foundation for the new world that emerged in the aftermath of the asteroid impact. However, it was not just a simple return to life as usual evolution, driven by the extreme conditions and new ecological pressures, would eventually lead to the rise of entirely new species. In the immediate aftermath, the surviving dinosaurs, along with other animals, had to find new niches and adapt quickly. Over time, as the planet began to stabilize, certain species began to evolve in response to the changing environment. Many of the smaller, more adaptable species would eventually give rise to the mammals that began to thrive in the post-dinosaur world. One example of the evolutionary shift was the rise of warm-blooded creatures such as early mammals, which were better suited to the colder, darker world left in the wake of the impact. These early mammals, which had once been small, nocturnal creatures, began to diversify and evolve to occupy the ecological niches left by the extinct dinosaurs. The survivors' role in this evolutionary process was vital, as the extinction of the dinosaurs opened up new ecological opportunities for mammals and other animals. The adaptations of the surviving species laid the groundwork for the rise of life forms that would eventually dominate the Earth: mammals, birds, which are direct descendants of certain dinosaurs, and other species that would shape the future of life on Earth. Although the dinosaurs disappeared from Earth after the asteroid impact, their legacy lived on in the ecosystems that followed. In the aftermath of the mass extinction, Earth underwent a long recovery process. The ecosystem took millennia to stabilize, and while many species were lost, the extinction of the dinosaurs allowed new life to emerge and evolve. The survivors, including mammals, birds, and even some reptiles, began to flourish in the absence of the giant reptiles that had once dominated the planet. The gradual rise of mammals was especially notable, as the extinction of the dinosaurs cleared the way for mammals to diversify and fill the ecological roles that had once been occupied by dinosaurs. Over millions of years, mammals would evolve into the vast array of species that we know today, including humans. The legacy of the dinosaurs is not just in their extinction, but also in the evolution of life that followed. Birds, the modern-day descendants of certain theropod dinosaurs, carry on the legacy of flight. The fossilized remains of dinosaurs continue to provide insights into Earth's ancient past, allowing scientists to piece together the story of the planet's history. Despite the catastrophic end to the age of dinosaurs, life on Earth continued to evolve and adapt. The asteroid that caused their extinction marks the end of one era and the beginning of another, with the rise of new life forms that would dominate Earth for millions of years. The dinosaurs, while gone, left an indelible mark on the history of life on Earth, shaping the planet's ecosystems and evolution for the future. The aftermath of the asteroid impact marked the end of the Cretaceous period and brought Earth into an entirely new epoch. The collision with the asteroid not only reshaped the planet physically, but also fundamentally altered its biodiversity. This impact caused an abrupt mass extinction, wiping out approximately 75% of all species, including nearly all the dinosaurs. The immediate consequences were catastrophic, with entire ecosystems collapsing in response to the sudden changes in climate, temperature, and environment. How Earth's ecosystems were fundamentally altered by the extinction event. In the wake of the asteroid's collision with Earth, the world was plunged into chaos. The impact released immense energy, creating seismic shocks that rippled across the planet. Fires ignited across vast landscapes, consuming forests and grasslands. Tsunamis flooded coastal regions, and the shockwaves from the impact unleashed pressure that caused volcanic eruptions. The sheer magnitude of destruction altered the physical structure of Earth. Mountains shifted, ocean depths changed, and even the planet's atmosphere was disturbed. As a result of this global devastation, Earth's ecosystems were radically altered. The lush, complex ecosystems of the late Cretaceous period, with their diverse populations of large reptiles, plants, and other animals, ceased to exist. Without dinosaurs at the top of the food chain, herbivores and carnivores alike were removed from the balance of life. This breakdown of ecosystems led to a collapse of food chains, reducing biodiversity to mere remnants of life clinging to survival in a broken world. Mass extinction and the collapse of food chains, explaining the immediate effects on biodiversity and how entire ecosystems disintegrated. The asteroid impact caused immediate and widespread destruction. Massive firestorms burned across regions, consuming vast forests and grasslands. The heat generated by the impact scorched the Earth, creating temperatures that were inhospitable to most life forms. Vast volcanic eruptions followed, releasing ash and sulfur into the atmosphere, leading to a nuclear winter effect. These volcanic particles blocked sunlight, plunging the planet into darkness. Herbivorous dinosaurs, which had formed the foundation of many ecosystems, were among the first to be wiped out. Without plant-eating dinosaurs, entire herbivore populations collapsed. This set off a chain reaction in food chains, where carnivorous dinosaurs and large predators lost their primary food sources and began to die off in rapid succession. Many smaller species, such as insects and amphibians, faced extreme challenges. Some managed to survive in isolated, less impacted areas, while others adapted by burrowing into the ground or hiding in underwater environments. The disappearance of these species further reduced the overall biodiversity of Earth. Early stages of recovery, the first signs of life beginning to recover from the devastation. How Earth started to heal from the wounds inflicted by the impact. Despite the overwhelming destruction, Earth began the slow process of recovery. In the years following the asteroid impact, small, resilient life forms began to emerge. Microorganisms, fungi, and simple plants such as mosses and grasses began to spread. These early colonizers were hardy, capable of thriving in less hospitable environments. Over time, more complex plants began to grow, laying the groundwork for future ecosystems. As Earth started to heal, small mammals, reptiles, and birds began to emerge from the remnants of the old ecosystems. Mammals, in particular, thrived in this new world, often taking refuge in burrows, underground tunnels, and sheltered areas. These mammals were small, adaptable creatures, including early forms of rodents and shrew-like animals. The recovery of Earth's atmosphere played a crucial role in this process. Gradually, the ash and volcanic particles in the atmosphere settled, allowing sunlight to penetrate the surface once more. This process reduced the darkness and cold that followed the impact, leading to a more stable climate in the long run. With the return of sunlight and warmth, plant life thrived once again, forming the base of a new food chain. The extinction of the dinosaurs opened up a vast array of opportunities for other life forms to evolve and adapt to the changing environment. Without the competition from large, dominant reptiles, mammals began to diversify and occupy the ecological niches left behind. Mammals, once relatively small and inconspicuous, began to evolve into larger forms. These mammals adapted to the new conditions by developing traits that allowed them to escape predators and find food in a changing world. Some species, such as Paraceratherium, evolved into giant herbivores capable of browsing on vegetation. Others, such as early carnivorous mammals like Creodonta, filled predator roles in ecosystems. Meanwhile, birds, direct descendants of certain theropod dinosaurs, adapted to life in trees and open spaces. Over time, birds diversified into various forms and became a major component of post-dinosaur ecosystems. Many of today's bird species evolved from these early avian forms. Additionally, reptiles that survived the catastrophe, such as crocodiles and turtles, continue to thrive in aquatic and semi-aquatic environments, adapting to new habitats formed after the asteroid impact. After the mass extinction event, the sudden disappearance of dinosaurs left a massive void in ecosystems across the planet. The Earth, devastated and scorched, became a dramatically different place. With the loss of dominant reptiles and large herbivores, an opportunity arose for mammals to thrive in ways they never had before. Mammals, which had once been small, nocturnal creatures, began to flourish and diversify. Mammals had certain traits that made them uniquely equipped to survive the new, harsh world. First, many mammals were warm-blooded, meaning they could regulate their body temperature in ways that cold-blooded dinosaurs could not. This allowed mammals to endure the dramatic climate shifts caused by the asteroid impact, which included prolonged cold spells, darkness from volcanic ash, and the aftermath of firestorms. Warm-bloodedness gave mammals an edge in surviving environments where temperature extremes were deadly to many other creatures. Additionally, mammals' reproductive strategies, which included giving birth to live young and nurturing them through extended parental care, allowed for quicker recovery and adaptation. Unlike the egg-laying dinosaurs, which were vulnerable to sudden environmental changes, mammals were able to protect their young from immediate threats, ensuring that their populations could bounce back faster. Mammals' ability to thrive in burrows and shelters, rather than relying on open environments, also helped them survive in the immediate aftermath of the impact. These burrows provided a safe haven from the fires and the drastic changes in temperature. Over time, mammals evolved more diverse forms, from tiny insectivores to large herbivores and carnivores, filling ecological niches left behind by dinosaurs. Mammals adapting to new niches, how the extinction created opportunities for mammals to evolve into larger forms, including the first large herbivores and carnivores. The extinction of dinosaurs and the collapse of established ecosystems left a gap in ecological roles that mammals were quick to fill. Without the competition from large herbivorous dinosaurs and powerful carnivores, mammals began to expand into new niches, diversifying in size and function. One of the most notable evolutionary paths was the development of large herbivores. With the absence of the giant plant-eating dinosaurs like Triceratops and Brachiosaurus, mammals began to evolve into large plant eaters to fill this role. Species like Indricotherium, one of the largest land mammals ever, emerged as massive browsers, consuming the abundant plant life that began to recover in the post-extinction world. These herbivorous mammals could grow to enormous sizes, reaching lengths of over 30 feet and weighing several tons. They used their large size to deter predators and feed on the lush vegetation that had regrown in the centuries following the asteroid impact. At the same time, carnivorous mammals evolved to fill the predatory role previously dominated by dinosaurs. Creatures like Creodonta evolved sharp teeth and claws, allowing them to hunt smaller mammals and other animals. These early carnivores were often smaller than the predatory dinosaurs they replaced, but were fast, agile, and highly adaptable. They could exploit the shifting food sources that arose in the post-impact world, from small mammals to the occasional surviving reptile. The newfound niches for mammals led to a diversification that would continue for millions of years, with mammals gradually growing in size and evolving into a wide range of species, from early marsupials to larger placental mammals. Emergence of other survivors, not just mammals, but how other species adapted to the post-dinosaur world, including reptiles, birds, and amphibians that began filling gaps left by extinct species. While mammals thrived in the wake of the dinosaurs' extinction, they were not the only survivors. Other species, including birds, reptiles, and amphibians, also played important roles in the new ecosystems that began to emerge. Birds, being direct descendants of certain theropod dinosaurs, had already adapted to a life of flight and had a significant advantage. While some bird species were wiped out during the mass extinction, many small, agile birds survived. These survivors were well equipped to exploit new niches that had opened up in the forests and skies. In the absence of large, flying reptiles like pteranodons, birds began to evolve into various forms, taking over roles as insect eaters, seed dispersers, and even small predators. Over time, birds diversified into hundreds of species, including some of the early forms of raptors and scavengers that would dominate ecosystems in the future. Reptiles, including crocodiles, lizards, and turtles, managed to endure the extinction event as well. Many of these species were already adapted to aquatic environments, which provided refuge from the catastrophic terrestrial events. Crocodiles, for example, could live in water and breathe air, which gave them a survival advantage when much of the land was scorched or covered in ash. As the planet began to recover, these reptiles adapted to new habitats, exploiting niches in both freshwater and terrestrial ecosystems. Amphibians such as frogs and salamanders also found ways to survive. They were able to take refuge in isolated, moisture-rich environments where many other species could not thrive. Their ability to reproduce in water and move between land and water made them resilient to the changing conditions. Over time, amphibians began to repopulate Earth, slowly rebuilding populations and evolving into the diverse species we see today. As life slowly returned to Earth, the regrowth of plant life played a pivotal role in the rebuilding of ecosystems. The impact of the asteroid had obliterated most plant life, and for years afterward, the Earth was a barren wasteland. However, as the volcanic ash and dust settled, the first signs of life began to emerge. Simple plants, such as mosses and ferns, were among the first to appear, as they required little sunlight and could thrive in the disturbed soils of a post-apocalyptic Earth. The recovery of plant life was critical for the restoration of ecosystems. As plants began to re-establish themselves, they provided the foundation for herbivores to return. Initially, smaller plants and shrubs were abundant, but over time, larger plants, such as conifers and cycads, began to take root. These plants provided food for herbivorous mammals and other survivors, which, in turn, created the necessary conditions for the predator species to emerge. As forests regrew and the atmosphere cleared, ecosystems began to rebuild in layers, with early pioneer species giving way to more complex and diverse plant life. The new ecosystems began to support a variety of herbivores, which in turn supported carnivores, creating the basic building blocks for the new web of life on Earth. Over millions of years, Earth's ecosystems would evolve into the rich diversity of species we know today, including the forests, grasslands, and oceans that support life in the present day. In the immediate aftermath of the asteroid impact, Earth's landscapes were dramatically altered, with vast fires consuming forests and volcanic ash blanketing much of the planet. For years, the world experienced darkness, extreme temperatures, and an inhospitable environment that made it difficult for plant life to survive. However, the resilience of certain plant species and the gradual recovery of vegetation marked the beginning of Earth's healing process. The first plants to emerge after the catastrophic event were hardy, fast-growing species such as mosses, ferns, and small shrubs. These plants could grow in low-light conditions and were able to take root in the disturbed soil left by the impact. In areas where volcanic ash settled, plants adapted to the high levels of carbon dioxide and sulfur, which had poisoned the atmosphere and soil. Over time, these pioneer species began to establish themselves in the barren landscape, creating a foundation for other, more complex plant life to take hold. While much of the planet was still struggling to support life, pockets of surviving plants began to spread. Trees such as cycads and conifers began to regrow in certain areas, providing food sources for herbivores. These early plant survivors had deep roots, allowing them to tap into the rich minerals in the soil that other plants couldn't access. Gradually, as vegetation recovered, herbivorous animals found these new plants and began to return to the world. The regrowth of plant life provided the critical resource for herbivores to re-establish themselves. As they began to graze once again, herbivores started to rebuild populations. The survival of plant life ensured the slow but steady return of ecosystems, as herbivores created the foundation for the next phase of recovery, influencing predator species to follow. Regrowth of ecosystems: how the plant life recovery paved the way for herbivores to survive, and how herbivores' return influenced predator populations. The regrowth of plant life set the stage for herbivores to return to Earth's ecosystems. The initial vegetation recovery, with simple plants such as ferns and mosses, provided a basic food source. As these plants flourished, they allowed herbivores, which had been largely decimated in the wake of the impact, to begin to repopulate. Small mammals and other herbivorous species were the first to benefit from the resurgence of plant life. These creatures had a significant advantage over larger herbivores, as they could survive on smaller, more manageable plants that had regrown. As these herbivores found new sources of food, their populations began to grow and diversify, slowly filling the ecological gaps left by the extinction of the dinosaurs. Larger herbivores, such as early forms of giant mammals, eventually evolved to take advantage of the abundant vegetation that was starting to thrive. Species like Indricotherium and Paraceratherium became massive plant eaters, capable of browsing tall trees and shrubs that other herbivores couldn't reach. These large herbivores required vast amounts of plant life to sustain themselves, and as the plant recovery continued, their populations grew, further enriching the ecosystems. The return of herbivores had a profound impact on predator species as well. Carnivorous mammals and smaller predators, such as early members of the Creodonta group, began to adapt to the growing populations of herbivores. These predators evolved specialized traits, such as sharper teeth and claws, to hunt the re-emerging prey. As herbivore populations increased, predator species began to follow, re-establishing the balance between prey and predators that had existed before the extinction event. New environmental balance, exploring how new plant and animal species began to interconnect, re-establishing a balance between predators and prey. As new plant species grew and herbivores began to re-enter ecosystems, a new environmental balance began to take shape. This recovery wasn't instantaneous, but over centuries, Earth's ecosystems began to rebuild themselves. New species of plants, many of which had evolved to cope with the changes brought by the asteroid impact, began to take root in various environments. As vegetation grew in density and diversity, it created habitats for other forms of life. The connection between plants, herbivores, and predators was slowly re-established. Herbivores grazed on the diverse plant life that had sprouted, while predators began to prey on the weaker or slower herbivores. The interactions between these groups of animals began to create a new cycle of life. This cycle was not a perfect restoration of the pre-impact world, but a new balance, a new web of life. With the return of trees and plants, various species of insects, birds, and amphibians returned to feed on the plants or prey on the smaller creatures. These interactions led to a diversified food chain that helped create a more complex ecological network. In turn, these creatures' interactions with one another influenced the evolution of new species. For example, birds, who had evolved from theropod dinosaurs, began to fill niches left by the flying reptiles. As they adapted to new diets and behaviors, they helped control insect populations and played roles in seed dispersal, contributing to the further spread of vegetation. Ultimately, this new balance between plants, herbivores, and predators formed the foundation for future ecosystems. Although it took millions of years for life to fully recover from the asteroid impact, this interconnection between plant and animal life allowed the Earth to become a thriving, biodiverse planet once again. Although the dinosaurs were wiped out in the aftermath of the asteroid impact, their legacy lives on in modern animals and ecosystems. The most direct connection to the ancient world of dinosaurs is found in birds. Birds are considered to be the descendants of small theropod dinosaurs, such as Archaeopteryx. Their evolution was one of the most significant consequences of the extinction event, as birds gradually adapted to fill ecological niches left by flying reptiles. Birds share many traits with their dinosaur ancestors, including similar bone structures, feathers, and a similar respiratory system. In fact, the evolution of feathers, which originally likely evolved for insulation and display, later played a crucial role in birds' ability to fly. The post-dinosaur world provided birds with a unique opportunity to diversify and evolve into the wide variety of species we see today. In addition to birds, the legacy of dinosaurs can be seen in the evolution of other creatures. Crocodiles and alligators, which survived the extinction event, are considered to be living remnants of ancient reptiles that roamed the earth with dinosaurs. While they didn't evolve in the same direction as birds, they are still closely related to the species that once dominated Earth's ecosystems. The extinction of the dinosaurs also paved the way for mammals to rise to dominance, leading to the evolution of the many species that would eventually rule the Earth, including humans. The loss of large dinosaurs allowed mammals to evolve into larger forms and occupy the ecological niches left behind. In essence, while dinosaurs are no longer present, their legacy lives on in the species that evolved from them and in the ecosystems they helped shape. The post-impact world would not be the same without the changes set into motion by the dinosaurs' extinction, marking the beginning of the modern age of mammals and birds. When we think of the dinosaurs' legacy, one of the most fascinating connections is found in birds. Birds are the direct descendants of small theropod dinosaurs, and this evolutionary link is incredibly evident in their physical and behavioral traits. Over millions of years, birds have evolved from these ancient creatures, yet many characteristics from their dinosaur ancestors remain. One of the most noticeable similarities between birds and their dinosaur ancestors is their skeletal structure. Birds have a lightweight, hollow bone structure, a feature shared with theropod dinosaurs like Velociraptor and Tyrannosaurus rex. These bones allowed birds to reduce their body weight for flight, much like the air sacs in dinosaurs' skeletons. Additionally, the structure of birds' legs and feet closely resembles that of their dinosaur ancestors. Birds' three-toed feet are a direct descendant of theropod dinosaurs, which also had 3 toes, enabling birds to perch and walk in a similar manner to their ancient relatives. Feathers, which are perhaps the most iconic feature of birds, also trace back to dinosaurs. Initially, feathers likely evolved for insulation or mating displays, but later became crucial for flight. Fossils of feathered dinosaurs such as Archaeopteryx show the evolutionary progression toward modern birds, providing an important connection between the past and the present. Behaviorally, birds also carry remnants of their dinosaur ancestors. Their social structures, communication methods, and even hunting strategies, such as in raptors like eagle or hawk, mirror those of certain predatory dinosaurs. In fact, the similarities are so striking that many paleontologists consider birds to be the last living dinosaurs, continuing the legacy of the ancient world in a modern form. The role of birds in modern ecosystems, how birds continue the legacy of dinosaurs as both predators and prey. Birds continue to play a vital role in ecosystems around the world, just as dinosaurs once did. As both predators and prey, they have become essential contributors to maintaining the balance of nature in modern environments. This role echoes the influence dinosaurs had on ecosystems during their reign, with birds filling similar niches. As predators, birds of prey such as eagles, hawks, and owls maintain the balance of animal populations. These birds hunt smaller mammals, reptiles, and other birds, helping to control the populations of these species. This is similar to how predatory dinosaurs control the population of smaller animals in their ecosystems. The hunting techniques of modern birds of prey, from their keen eyesight to their powerful talons, are reminiscent of the specialized hunting abilities of carnivorous dinosaurs. On the flip side, birds also serve as prey for many animals, continuing the ancient role of smaller dinosaurs and their place in the food chain. Small mammals, reptiles, and even other birds depend on birds as a source of food. For example, snakes, large mammals, and certain reptiles prey upon birds, showing how they maintain the food chain and ecological stability in modern environments, much like herbivorous dinosaurs once did. Additionally, birds play a crucial role in pollination and seed dispersal, behaviors that were essential in the post-extinction recovery of ecosystems. This has parallels to the role that dinosaurs, particularly herbivores, once played in dispersing seeds and maintaining plant diversity. By helping to spread seeds, birds continue a natural cycle that supports the regeneration of plant life, keeping ecosystems healthy and thriving. The continued influence of extinct reptiles, examining how modern reptiles like crocodiles and lizards still hold a piece of the dinosaur legacy in their evolutionary lines. While birds are the direct descendants of dinosaurs, modern reptiles like crocodiles, lizards, and turtles also carry with them a legacy of the ancient reptiles that once roamed the earth alongside dinosaurs. Though not as closely related to dinosaurs as birds, these reptiles are still evolutionary cousins and preserve certain traits and behaviors that can be traced back to the Mesozoic era. Crocodiles, for example, are often considered living fossils because they have retained many characteristics that have remained unchanged for millions of years. Their thick, scaly skin, powerful jaws, and semi-aquatic nature resemble the ancient reptiles that once thrived in the time of the dinosaurs. While crocodiles survived the mass extinction event, they were significantly altered in the aftermath. Yet, their persistence over time shows the survival and adaptability of certain species in a changing world. Lizards, too, share a deep evolutionary connection to dinosaurs. In fact, many species of modern lizards, such as the Komodo dragon, resemble some of the larger predatory dinosaurs in their shape and behavior. These reptiles share a common ancestor with dinosaurs and have retained many similar traits, such as their body structure, hunting techniques, and even the use of their tail for balance or offense. Turtles, though a different branch of reptiles, also survived the mass extinction event and continue to fill ecological roles similar to the reptiles of the Mesozoic era. Their hard shells, slow movement and diets of plants or small animals are reminiscent of certain extinct reptiles that once coexisted with dinosaurs. While modern reptiles are not direct descendants of dinosaurs, they offer a glimpse into the past and demonstrate how some of Earth's oldest creatures adapted and survived the cataclysmic changes brought by the asteroid impact. The extinction of the dinosaurs marked a monumental shift in the history of life on Earth. For millions of years, dinosaurs dominated the planet, shaping ecosystems and influencing the evolution of other species. However, their sudden disappearance paved the way for new forms of life to evolve and adapt to the rapidly changing world. In the aftermath of the asteroid impact, life on Earth looked drastically different from the vibrant dinosaur-filled landscapes that had once existed. The destruction caused by the impact led to a collapse of ecosystems and a massive loss of biodiversity. But over time, life began to recover. The Earth was no longer ruled by giant, lumbering reptiles, but by smaller, more adaptable creatures, including mammals, birds, and reptiles that had survived the extinction event. While the world after the dinosaurs was vastly different, it was no less dynamic or diverse. Mammals, which had previously been small and inconspicuous, began to evolve and diversify, filling ecological niches left open by the dinosaurs' extinction. Birds, the direct descendants of dinosaurs, carried the legacy of their ancient relatives forward, while reptiles like crocodiles and lizards continued to thrive in the post-dinosaur world. The ecosystems that followed were radically different from those of the Mesozoic era, but they still bore traces of the past. The recovery of plant life, the return of herbivores, and the evolution of new predators all served to rebuild the intricate web of life that had once been dominated by dinosaurs. In a way, life had gone on, but it had evolved and adapted to the new conditions, creating a world that was both familiar and foreign. Ultimately, the extinction of the dinosaurs set the stage for the rise of new life forms, leading to the modern world we know today. The legacy of the dinosaurs lives on, not just in birds and reptiles, but in the ecosystems that continue to evolve and shape the planet. Life continued, albeit very differently, but it remained as diverse and dynamic as ever, proving the resilience of nature in the face of catastrophe. In the immediate aftermath of the asteroid impact and the mass extinction event, Earth was a very different place. The loss of the dinosaurs, alongside many other species, led to a drastic reduction in biodiversity. The ecosystems that once teemed with a rich variety of life began to collapse, leaving behind a world full of gaps in the food chain and massive environmental challenges. However, with the passing of time, life began to slowly rebound. In the years following the extinction event, Earth's biodiversity took on a new trajectory. The extinction of so many large and specialized species opened up ecological niches, allowing other creatures to adapt, evolve, and fill these gaps. The collapse of ecosystems meant that survivors had to quickly adjust to the changing environment. The global cooling, followed by warming and a return of more stable conditions, set the stage for a major shift in life forms. Plant life began to rebound, first with hardy species capable of surviving the harsh conditions. These plants, in turn, provided food sources for the survivors of the extinction event, leading to the gradual rebuilding of food chains and ecosystems. Although life on Earth had been devastated, the rebuilding process eventually led to a more diverse and varied array of species that adapted to the new conditions. While dinosaurs had been the dominant life forms for millions of years, their sudden disappearance allowed mammals, which had previously existed in the shadows, to rise and fill the gaps left by the extinction event. Mammals, which had been small, nocturnal creatures for the most part, now had the opportunity to diversify and expand into ecological roles that had once been held by dinosaurs. In the absence of large herbivores, mammals began to evolve into larger forms, adapting to new food sources. For example, early mammals evolved into large herbivores such as Paraceratherium, a giant, hornless rhinoceros-like mammal that grazed on the lush vegetation that began to regrow after the impact. Predators also flourished, with the emergence of early carnivorous mammals like Creodonta, which occupied similar niches to the carnivorous dinosaurs that once roamed the Earth. The extinction of the dinosaurs opened the doors for birds to evolve into diverse forms as well. Birds, which are the direct descendants of certain theropod dinosaurs, began to diversify into various sizes and types. With the vast open spaces and new environments created by the extinction of the dinosaurs, birds expanded into new niches, from scavengers to skilled hunters. In the following millions of years, they would evolve into the wide variety of species we know today, from songbirds to the mighty eagles. Although dinosaurs are long extinct, their legacy lives on in the animals that evolved after their disappearance. Perhaps the most direct link between the ancient dinosaurs and modern life is through birds. Birds are the living descendants of theropod dinosaurs, and their physical traits, such as feathers, hollow bones, and certain skeletal structures, bear strong similarities to their dinosaur ancestors. Birds are the last living remnants of the dinosaur era, a direct connection to the distant past. In addition to birds, the legacy of the dinosaurs can also be seen in the ecosystems that evolved in the wake of their extinction. The absence of dinosaurs allowed other animals to rise and dominate the Earth, and while these new life forms may not have been direct descendants of dinosaurs, their evolution was deeply influenced by the changes brought about by the asteroid impact. Many of today's dominant animal species, from mammals to reptiles, owe their rise to the opportunities created by the extinction event. Dinosaurs also shaped ecosystems in ways we still see today. The plant life that evolved in the aftermath of the extinction was influenced by the types of vegetation that existed before the impact. For instance, the flowering plants that appeared after the mass extinction were often dependent on the long-term survival of the plant species that had existed in the Cretaceous period. These plants, in turn, provided food for the mammals and other survivors of the impact, establishing the foundation for modern ecosystems. The end of the dinosaurs marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. The world that emerged after the asteroid impact was vastly different from the one that had existed before. Life went on, but it did so in new and unexpected ways. Mammals, birds, and other survivors adapted to a world that was still recovering from the environmental chaos caused by the impact. While the planet had once been dominated by massive reptiles, the world that followed was one of smaller, more diverse creatures. The ecosystems that developed after the extinction were not as reliant on large, dominant species, but instead included a variety of organisms that filled different niches and played unique roles in their environments. Life continued, and the Earth slowly began to return to stability, but it did so without the towering presence of the dinosaurs. In this new world, evolution would take its course, eventually leading to the rise of humans millions of years later. The legacy of the dinosaurs, though, is still felt today. They shaped the ecosystems, climates, and evolutionary paths that allowed for the development of modern life. Their extinction was the catalyst for the rapid diversification of life forms that followed. Life continued on Earth, but in ways that were profoundly different from the age of the dinosaurs. Thus, while the dinosaurs' reign came to an end, the impact they had on Earth's biodiversity and evolution was long-lasting, and their influence is still visible in the animals and ecosystems that thrive today.